Man of disciplined mind who moves amongst the objects of sense with the senses under control and free from attachment and aversion, he attains purity of spirit. So in the previous two verses, Shri Krishna had described the 8-stage process, how a human being can perish. Does that therefore mean, so another question on his mind, does that therefore mean that one should just stay away from the sense objects completely? That's the question that was in Arjun's mind, and probably in your minds, and that's answered in this verse. Shri Krishna says, no, that's not the way. The way is to have a disciplined mind, and to be in control of the mind. Such a person makes contacts with objects of sense, but with the senses under control, and therefore, as said in this verse, this person is free from attachment and free from aversion. If a person can do this, then he can attain purity in spirit. There are people who are not even happy after enjoying the sense objects, but these people described in this verse enjoy the sense objects and still remain pure. The latter are people of settled intelligence, sthitaprajna. A person that does not make contact with the sense objects and bows down to God only can still also be thinking about the sense objects in his mind. On the other hand, a person who turns to God and has his mind on God can attain this purity in spirit even after enjoying sense objects. We must understand these two different states properly. If a person is concentrated on God or the supreme energy, then if he makes contacts with the sense objects, then these will be an offering to God. Therefore, we have to make this decision whether during our lives, whether we want to have a mind on the God, the supreme energy, or on objects. They can either be sense objects or offerings to God. Offerings to God come from having a mind concentrated in God. And sense objects, this view of sense enjoyment, comes from having a mind concentrated on sense objects. The former moves among the objects of sense, but still attains purity in spirit. This is because all his senses are turned towards the soul. His senses are not running towards the sense objects, but it is his will, it's his soul's wish, with his wish for his soul, his concentration on the soul, that he's moving among the sense objects. As a single example, if our senses are not in control, then our tongues may have the desire for sweets we had 6 months ago. The tongue sends a message to the mind that had such delicious sweets 6 months ago. And the mind thinks that it hasn't had these delicious sweets for 6 months, and therefore the tongue gets a craving for them. When a person is settled in intelligence, then they may get happy when they see sweets in front of them, but they see them as an offering to God rather than that contact between the tongue and the sense object. And therefore, they attain that purity in spirit. But these people, they never have their tongues craving for the sweets, and so they don't need to make them. They're doing it as an offering to God. If the sense objects come in front of them, then they enjoy them, but even when they do not come in front of them, they're still happy. Where the person who craves the sense objects is only happy when the object comes in front of him. And therefore, this person runs after the sense objects, whereas the person who's doing it as an offering to God enjoys them, but doesn't run after them, and doesn't have that feeling of deprivement, feeling of incompleteness when they're not there. And this is a very big difference. If our senses run after sense objects, but they don't drag the person along like a slave, then that's because he's absorbed in a self. And if a person is that, then he attains purity in spirit. It's a question, the ultimate deciding point is a question of whether you're the owner or not of the sense objects. You can only attain purity of spirit when you're the boss, when you're the master. When you're the slave, then you can never attain this purity in spirit. A slave never enjoys anything. Only the master, the boss, enjoys everything. If we have a nice sofa set in our house with nice upholstery, then only the boss can enjoy it. The boss can sit on it and think that he has a nice sofa set. But if there's servants in the house, then they have to look after the sofa, they have to clean it. How can they enjoy the sofa when they sit on it? Because they can only clean it. Whatever sense object there is, you can only enjoy the sense object if you're the master and not the slave. And a person who's settled in intelligence is the owner, the master of these sense objects. He orders his senses to enjoy the sense objects, and therefore he can attain purity of spirit. What happens when one attains purity of spirit? The next verse describes it. Verse 65.